Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about what I'll be starting in Path of Exile 2's patch 0.3. And it is, surprise, crossbows, right? We've had this for the last 2 leagues. It's always been my league starter, my go-to. It's just extremely safe to play. There is always good archetypes, always have been. Before the buffs, after the buffs, even more so. In Season 1, I played Explosive Shot with 3 dragons and Shock Burst rounds, and it was amazing. In the patch 0.2, I played Glacial Shot, and that was also amazing, although that has been nerfed to the absolute utter ground. Not for leveling, but for endgame if you want to make it a one-button build. But they made a plethora of adjustments and added new stuff, like, for example, reworked ballistas, added mortar cannon, which I don't know how it's going to work, but we're going to talk about it extensively later. The mercenary area got the most love out of all of the areas on the passive tree. We don't know the nodes, at least as of this recording. So I'll show that off a little bit and what we could glean from the icons. And I'll talk about the Ascendancy Choice because Witchhunter just got a huge buff. And Tactician as well is looking quite interesting depending on some things. So everything in this video is obviously theoretical. Some of them I know. Obviously, like, I'll talk about my plan B, which is just normal crossbows. I know it works. Nothing has been really nerfed. But all the new stuff is theoretical, so go in with that mindset. Let's talk crossbow skills first, because there has been some sweeping changes, but most of them are actually global and not all that skill specific. There's no more movement speed reduction across the board when it comes to reloading your crossbow and also switching crossbow ammunition, which was both huge for Explosive Shot, because Explosive Shot probably wants another single target skill, and that is now a lot easier and a lot smoother. I don't know how it's going to look in game because there's an animation. Is this just going to be, like, I don't know how it's going to look instant. Might look really, really goofy. There might be some exploits that we'll see. But what I'm trying to say is it's going to feel so much smoother, especially because Explosive Shot, big boom, but it has 30% less reload speed, and in that time, no more movement speed penalty. As well as that, you can now copy your weapon to your offhand, and oh boy, with some of the Witchhunter changes we'll go over, that is a pretty big deal. Not having to get 2 crossbows anymore, it was definitely a pain point, especially early, because they can get quite expensive. Otherwise, Explosive Shot didn't really get anything numerical, which is nice. I had Galvanic Arrow here, by the way. I just want to say, I'm getting completely confused. Galvanic Shards, Explosive Shot, fucking rounds, right? Like, whatever. It will happen in this video. You'll see it. Galvanic Shards was quite strong and the most popular crossbow build last league. It was actually exceptionally strong. It just got completely overshadowed by Lightning Spear. Now, this one got changed to be a lot more interesting, in my opinion. A lot of people say this is nerfed. I actually think it's going to be buffed for some use cases, although the clear speed right now on it is questionable. So basically, it is going to do more damage per hit, which is going to be better for your shock, especially if you want to follow it up with a shock burst round. You might actually be able to a lot more reliably shock and not have to do some weird offhand bow stuff. And it does fire additional fragments, so instead of 6 fragments with quality, it now fires 10 fragments, so that's over 500% damage effectiveness. And if you can shotgun them all, as you know, they combine to a huge shock. Clear should be decent, but you can't just, like, I don't know, Gatling gun anymore, right? It's only 1 shot. So this will depend on what tools they give you for reload speed. You're now going to be capped by that. The advantage of Galvanic Shards is you don't need to use 3 dragons as you do with Explosive Shot. It's lightning already. You don't need to do any shenanigans to shock without having to do some weird offhand things. Shock Burst rounds. Now, at first, you're like, oh, Shock Burst rounds got nerfed by 15%. So instead of a lot of damage, it now does a lot of damage. But it's actually quite a decent buff in terms of QL. So shock across the board got increased to have a 8-second duration. I don't know exactly where it is. I think it's somewhere here. Yeah, shock now lasts 8 seconds. And if you know, before you get the shock duration on the passive tree, and we don't even know where that is right now, it was quite a pain. And even then, you can now probably still take shock duration on top. 4-second window for your damage was absolutely atrocious. 8-second window is so much better. And that on top of the fact that you can now way easier swap between stuff. Weapon, I didn't even talk about this. Weapon swap speed removed. It's now instant, right? Which is also big. So all these crossbow builds that swap between rounds, it is just going to feel so much better. And then I guess Hailstorm rounds. This is similar to the bow skill, where you kind of just accumulate these rounds over time, and then you can press it for an explosion. Now, I didn't really like it before, but it might be nice for an AoE nuke now, because it has 4-meter radius. Whether you're gonna need that with crossbows, which already has good clear, I have no idea. But for example, if Galvanic Shards overall does more damage but has worse clear now, Hailstorm rounds could support that and make it less awkward. I'm not really sure, but that AoE change is quite crazy, and it also fires like way faster. Now, in terms of overlapping, it's probably going to be nerfed. All of this we'll have to try out, but I think they wanted to make it an AoE nuke, and it could be an option, especially while leveling. There's also Ratha's Assault, which looks ridiculous to me. This one lets you load 3 bolts when you dodge, and you load 3 additional bolts. So for every skill that only has 1 bolt, this might be just completely, utterly ridiculous. Like, I'm not really sure where you get this. I'm not really sure if this is going to make it in the game, but do expect that I will be trying it out. For my Ascendancy choice, big disclaimer here, I'm not 100% sure whether I'm going to be Witchhunter or Tactician, but you can respec it now. Just in case you haven't played in a while and you don't know that, you can now quite easily respec your Ascendancy tree. Now, Ascendancy-wise, let's get this out of the way. There has been an update to the patch notes, as most of you have gleaned by now, with Witchhunter getting 100 passive skill points become weapon set skill points. If you've never used weapon set skill points, you're missing out. I do have a video guide about this, but basically, in short form, you can make your points into flex points. So you can kind of spread them out a little bit and make different things work. The one thing you can't do when you do weapon swap points is you cannot allocate jewels and you cannot allocate keystones. So you'll have to work around that. Now, what can you do with full weapon swap points? Which, once again, you're actually going to have full weapon swap. It's not just 100. It's on top of what you already have. So technically all of them are, but it won't be, because you will have to take some jewels. You will have to outline your tree. For example, I don't know. This might be an outline, right? Maybe you want, okay, Iron Reflexes. I mean, okay, yeah. But let's say, I don't know, you want Acro, and this is going to be your outline. And now from here on out, you can, I don't know, going to different directions. And this is going to be a little bit of a brain breaker, so to say. And that's something people will have to figure out. It will not be a day one thing. But some things on the top of my head would be, with the new grenades and mortars, you could literally have one weapon swap that just takes all the grenade nodes, all the ballista nodes, which go up to here. You could take all of this for free. Even get buffs like this, which are global. You could take banner nodes, right? And then on your main hand, you can either deal damage yourself, or you can just spec into, I don't know, defense or whatever. This is definitely a thing. I mean, if you're a really good player, you're going to be able to pull this off maybe. So you could technically put all your offensive points into one part, deal damage with passive damage dealers. If you don't know, totems do snapshot their damage from one tree to the other. So you swap, and then you have the second tree with all of your defense. Or you could obviously just go temporal chains. You could make every normal mob basically like freeze in place, have an enfeeble setup, whatever you wish. It requires a lot of pathing, but it does work out. So this node will be quite a lot stronger. Also, this node will now be cooldown recovery rate, which is quite big. A few notes about Witchhunter, because people always say how bad it is, and it is kind of true, but a point like this can completely warp how this is being played. A few things I want to say from personal experience. The first one is Culling Strike is underrated early game, quite a bit. If you don't know what Culling Strike does, in PoE 2, Culling Strike works for different values at different thresholds. So against normal mobs, once they get to 30%, they die. Against magic, once they get to 20, rares against 10, and uniques on 5. So 30% cull basically means 42% more damage against normal mobs, 20% cull, 25% more against magic, 11% against rares, and so on. So it gets worse the harder the enemy, which sounds bad, but the way PoE 2 works is not all white mobs are pushovers as they are in PoE 1, especially early on, some of these big boys. This is going to be useful. I'm not saying you're going to use this in endgame, but early on, this would be easily the first Ascendancy I would allocate. Now, Witchbane and No Mercy, I'm not really a big fan of. Decimating Strike is like, okay. And then we have Sorcery Ward, which I think actually got buffed this patch because of the quality changes. Now, yes, Sorcery Ward in the patch notes did get its quality reduced, but that, I mean, it didn't do anything before, right? Like, this was basically a dead stat, and now you can actually get global quality from the tree. so it's still better than before. And what this does is it gives you less armor and evasion rating. This actually got buffed quite a bit last patch and is now decent. You can get a ton of LE damage, not LE damage reduction, but like an LE hit shield, and it recharges way faster than it used to, around about 6 seconds. And don't forget, you can also put support in it because it's a skill. And don't forget that now you can use, I don't know, as many of each support gem as you want, so you don't have to pick and choose. As for my other choice, Tactician, it all depends once again on the passive tree, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well, as at least from what we can glean from the leaks. Can place multiple banners. Now, this one got changed to not, banners got completely changed, basically. But this one did not just get changed in terms of what it does. It also now has a new mechanic called Glory. And this one will function similar to Valor, but also not. So you now get regen. Depending on if you can still scale this value on the tree, you might actually be able to have close to full uptime even while mapping, probably more like 70-80%, but they could completely destroy the tree. So right now there is banner buffs linger on you for 4 seconds after you leave the area. If this is still there, I mean, I don't know. I'm probably starting Tactician. We'll have to see. The banners themselves are way more powerful now. There is one with 30% increased movement speed from 5, 30% more armor and evasion, and another one with max res. That one is not that crazy, but this one has more attack damage and extra accuracy, extra attack speed. This one you'll probably see on most builds just as like a boss button, not just Tacticians. But Tacticians are definitely going to have the advantage in case banners do get ultra buffed and the tree kind of stays the same. Other than that, Solid Plan has gotten even better this patch. Last patch they introduced Trinity, which is extremely strong and costs 100 spirit. This patch they introduced Mirage Archer, which apparently costs 60 spirit. So Mirage Archer, you basically dodge roll and then it will create like this mirage that stands around. It's kind of like in PoE 1, the Deadeye node, I forgot how it's called, but it's not going to follow you around. It's just going to stand there kind of like a totem. And I think this is going to be like extremely strong. It has 30% less damage, but it does 70% of your damage. So an absolute boss nuke, and it's going to clear stragglers. And then all the other defensive stuff you would put on one of these builds. And so Solid Plan is ridiculously strong. If there's more backup, the way totems now work, this is straight up 25% more totem damage. This node might be good. We'll talk about more of that in the Mortar section. And this is still trash. Now, defensive-wise, this one is a little bit of an interesting one. So, stay light, use cover. So, this patch, they introduced a new modifier for armor. And yes, armor will be a little bit sketchy, but I think Tactician might just be the best armor ascendancy for whatever that's worth, right? But there's the stat. Percentage of armor applies to elemental damage from hit. And I don't know if this is an oversight, but look at this. So, this node defends with 200 armor, which is broken. It's like basically you use armor as if you had double, right? But as a downside, it says maximum physical damage reduction is 50%. It specifies physical damage reduction. I don't know if this is an oversight, but technically, if you get enough of this stat, then you might actually get to 90% LE damage reduction. Probably not happening. That's probably just a typo. But if it isn't, I'm just saying this could be quite interesting, especially with one of the new keystones and some of the Tactician changes. Actually, let me show you the Tactician change first. So right here, you gain deflection rating equal to 20% of armor. So what you can do is you go full armor, you grab Iron Reflexes, you go this, and the problem is it says gain, so I don't know if it's actually going to work with Iron Reflexes. Probably not, but if it does, great. Otherwise, there is a Glancing Blow keystone here, which I didn't really know what to do with, but this might be the place to use it. So Glancing Blows now provides chance to evade is unlucky, which on this version we wouldn't really do evasion all that much because one of the downsides of this node is that maximum chance to evade is 50. So it being unlucky, it sucks, but yeah, it is what it is. But chance to deflect is lucky. Well, another question mark. It's going to depend on what the deflect formula will look like. But this whole package might just be absolutely broken, depending on how this is worded. Is it just a mistake? We'll have to see. The biggest downside I see with the setup, even if it does work, is that you don't really have much avoidance because you can't use a shield and your evasion is kind of scuffed. And then we have the passive tree rework. I unfortunately couldn't find who sent me this. I'm sorry if you watch this, feel shouted out. But there's basically everything is circled here that's new. And if you compare this, I've already compared this to the other sides of the tree. Mage got quite a bit on the top, but Crossbows won out big time. Like, depending on how good these nodes are, Crossbows always had this problem that they would have to path up to ranger area, basically immediately grab the herald nodes to get increased damage and whatnot. That made leveling a lot more painful than ranger, and potentially we could be eating here now, right? Like we could literally be here for level 70, 80, and I wanna... From the icons, we can kind of glean what some of these might do. Somebody also made this, which I'll actually link in the description, which is quite cool. Just look at how full everything becomes in the Witchhunter area. It is ridiculous how much extra stuff got added. Now, we did some detective work on another one of these, and we saw the icons. So we don't know what exactly it does, but so this has the crossbow icon. So it has the icon of exactly this. This is how it looks like. What it's going to be exactly, we don't know. Is it going to be reload speed? Not sure, but there's another one here, and it's right next to the jewel, so the pathing is basically free. There is a ballista wheel here, which will replace the totem wheel. Hard to say, will they separate melee totems from range totems like a pure one? No clue. There is another ballista wheel right here. It says from the icon, but also from the way it kind of is shaped. Same as down here, they like to do that. There are 2 skill speed clusters with 2 notables each. This one is weird. It's also right here. The fact that there's 4 of those, so it's the same icon as, for example, acceleration, which don't get your hopes up. I don't think they're going to give you movement speed, right? But it could be sprint related. It is quite a bit of these notables. So what would it do? It could be sprint related. It could just be attack speed or movement speed while stationary. Who knows with GDG? Other than that, we can glean that there is a new projectile cluster up here with 3 notables. Now, the other one with 3 notables we have up here is quite substantial. It changes the way your build plays. It has pierce, fork, and chance to chain from terrain. So there's a chance it's going to be maybe something crossbow related, maybe +1 bolt loaded. I won't get my hopes up, but it could just be increased damage and nice to path to. We'll have to see. There's another very central one, easy to path to, right next to the banner nodes that also has the projectile icon. There's a presence cluster right up here. I'm assuming it's not aura, but it could also be. They look exactly the same. And other than that, it's hard to glean. We know this is an attribute cluster, and we saw some of the notables, but the small points here give 8 of 1 stat each, which might be a nice thing, especially if we stay in this area for a longer time. So after looking at this, you can kind of understand how it's hard to make a lot of the decisions, and I'm just kind of giving you options in this video. Then let's talk about the ballista changes. Artillery ballista, siege ballista, which is the new name of artillery ballista, and artillery is the new ripwire. We'll go over that in a second. Now scales off of your weapon damage instead of flat. So if you didn't know, 34 was the max for ballistas last league, which gave you 355 to 532 flat damage, which made it an interesting choice. You basically didn't scale flat damage. Your prefixes were kind of open. So it was a lot more friendly towards the early game where you couldn't afford a good weapon, but now it's a lot more friendly towards the end game. So yeah, if you think you can just run around with ballistas and one-shot everything like you could last patch without looking at your weapon, that's not going to work anymore, but you still can if you have a up-to-date weapon. Crit is now in the building because if you look at a, I don't know, perfect crossbow, you can now get up to 10 base crit on your ballistas. Quite nice. The attack speed roll, right? Like we're talking about really good gear, and this is kind of a league start scenario, so I don't know how relevant this is, but just giving you like the option is quite nice. And it's going to be great single target for normal builds. People are talking about ballista builds or whatever. Ballistas are now going to be legit a boss button. You don't scale differently from your main skill anymore. You can deal damage on your own, and then on the boss, you plop down 2-3 ballistas, and they might like give you 50-60% more damage. And there's a good chance that's how I'm going to use them, because that's how they seem to intend this change. And if we look at these, I mean, like the damage is still there. It is still there, and it now scales off of your weapon. The base attack speed seems low, 25%, but do remember that was already the case. It had a 2.5 second attack time, so that's a 0.4 attacks per second, which if you take the base of a crossbow, 1.6 times 0.25, that is exactly what you're getting. But you now have also the option to get an attack speed roll on the crossbow, which you didn't have before. Although do note that apparently martial tempo isn't more attack speed anymore. We'll have to see about that. But in general, relatively, I think this is a great change. And then let's talk Mortar Cannon, which is a new meta gem that can support any grenade you put into it. And we know very little about this one. People are very hyped about it, and it is potentially broken. Do I think they're going to balance it in a way where it's broken? No, I think they're rather going to underbalance it, especially with how careful they have been and how much they're doing pre-nerfs right now. But I will 100% try it out. So if you don't know, this is all we know right now about Mortar Cannon. It's going to be tier 11, which means, I think, level 41. Correct me if I'm wrong. It has a totem duration of 8 seconds, which is not on the higher side, but it's okay. Limit of 1 totem, assuming we can increase that as normal, and we know nothing else. So there is another tab here in game where we're going to see what it does. It says it improves the cooldown recovery rate, which it better does. Otherwise, it's going to be like dead in the water. But how much is that? And also, if it doesn't, I mean, it will have a less damage multiplier. Otherwise, we can literally restart the league, right? Is it going to have a less attack speed multiplier? Probably, like all the other ballistas. It will also scale off of your weapon, so it is right now, unfortunately, impossible to tell how good it is. From the trailer, we can glean that it won't have any uses, so you probably won't put it down and it's just going to fire its uses, and then it has a cooldown. It will fire steadily, unless they showed it in a weird scenario. I'm not really sure, which is probably for the better. Otherwise, if it had uses or charges, you could just replace a new one and it would have new charges after the first one is out. Grenades could also be more or less busted depending on how the new support gems are. Like, is there new lineage supports for them? How are their supports reworked for them? As for which grenade to use, the most obvious one I'll probably try out immediately is a gas grenade, and you ignite it with something like an explosive shot. I will be trying out basically all of them. If the damage really sucks, it might just end up being like a application for electrocute on Voltaic grenade. I don't think it's gonna be that bad, but it's possible. Cluster grenade got changed, so yeah, everything's up in the air here. What I will say though is grenades as a whole, as an archetype, got quite a buff by Scattershot not being global. You can now throw it on whatever you want. In terms of, do you go Deadeye, do you go Witchhunter? Deadeye would be the obvious choice, but I will say the Witchhunter change here has me questioning this a little bit because of the new totem cluster here. I'm assuming it's also going to work for Mortar Cannon, but once again, up in the air. There being a new AoE notable here, which I forgot to mention earlier. We'll really have to see, because on one weapon set, you could have all the grenade stuff, all the ballista stuff, and then on the other one you could have defense, or you could have like your activator for your gas grenade. You could have your banner stuff. There's actually another thing I wanted to talk about, which is Tactician. So if we go the gas grenade route, you could pre-fire with this, so cannon's ready. When you fire an attack skill, which is usually a downside, but just like in PoE1 with Toxic Rain, you can actually pre-fire, and then you could say, oh, but maybe you just throw the gas grenade and they exploded, but that sounds really, really clunky for clear. We'll have to see. One thing I want to address real quick is there have been leaks about Witchhunter, which we haven't seen in the patch notes yet. This is from a test server, apparently. Maybe it's not going to make it into the patch notes. I'm assuming this is not going to make it, just straight up. But if it does, Witchhunter mark. This mark, we don't know what it does, but the effect on the bottom is quite interesting. It gives you base crit for attacks per 1% of missing enemy life. This basically scales up your damage like crazy the further it goes down, which is quite strong because, for example, bosses get harder and harder usually the lower they go in HP and the later the phases, as well as that it synergizes really well with Decimating Strike. And the other thing that is apparently changing is the Explodey could go from 10 to 15%. Once again, also probably not making it. It's not in the patch notes. And this concentration cluster combined into one point. So if that happens, expect me to be Witchhunter for sure of a Tactician. If it doesn't, then it's still up in the air. As for leveling, I know that it's possible to level with crossbows, and there have been some changes, and maybe grenades are OP. All good, but I'll probably start with Stormcaller Arrow. If you had to ask me right now, until level 21, and then I'll go crossbows. I'll go, or whenever the cutoff point is. I actually forgot when the tier is, but whenever you can get Glacial Bolt. So once I get Glacial Bolt, I will be going for that. For people who have said this one got gutted, that is true, right? That's what I said. But for leveling, this doesn't actually matter because your ballistas will be exploding your Glacial Bolt. It's exactly like last league, which is kind of delayed anyways, and you do get more AoE for the shatter effect. So you won't be able to automate it, but for campaign, it's still going to be an absolute destruction. But I will be trying this out on stream today, so yeah, I'll let you know. I will put out a video about leveling, as sparse as that's going to be and as vague as that's going to be, but it will be out. And yeah, after all of this is said and done, don't forget, Explosive Shot's still there, Galvanic Shards are still there, Shock Burst rounds is as good as ever. Crossbows will have really strong archetypes regardless, and I'm not gonna bullshit you here and tell you, oh, this is OP or whatever. the things I've heard right now with like nothing out, the whole like passive tree isn't really, like the passive tree is going to be so important for the Witchhunter area, which is usually kind of weak. You want to get to Ranger as soon as possible. If you have to path less, this is a big deal. How our banner is going to look like, it is just really up in the air. So I'll just laid everything bare that I thought about in the last few days. And what exactly I'm going to play is going to crystallize in the first week. But just know that my fallback plan is always going to be explosive shock burst rounds, as it was in Season 1. Do not go Glacial Bolt though, at least not the setup I used last patch. It's not going to work. You're going to deal 80% less damage if there's going to be a Glacial Bolt build that's going to look vastly different. And if you want to know immediately, you can also check me out on twitch.tv/Palsteron. I was obviously be streaming, yeah, basically nonstop on League Start before testing. So yeah, if you want to see what I'm currently playing, that's the place. And yeah, hope you guys have a great League Start. And with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.